Hey folks, happy Christmas week to those of you who are watching this around the time of its publication, and to those of you who are watching it some other time, happy whatever week it is when you're watching this. I recently did a video called Relax, It's Only a Movie about how people overreact to seeing bad movies or bad TV shows or bad entries in beloved series or franchises of theirs, whatever it might be, whether it's a movie or a show or a video game or a comic book or a book or whatever. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that because I got a comment on that video that reminded me of something else that then reminded me of something else that I wanted to share with you. So the comment is from G.S. Barlev, and they say, I remember when Go Set a Watchman was released and hearing from all the people who went into law because of Atticus Finch. Even they were less hyperbolic than the Last Jedi haters. I read that comment and I realized it's been almost 10 years since the release of Go Set a Watchman. Next year, 2025, will be 10 years since that book was published. And just in case you don't know what I'm talking about or you've forgotten about it, Go Set a Watchman is the kind of sort of sequel to Kill a Mockingbird that was published in 2015, as it turns out, only a year before the death of Harper Lee, the author of To Kill a Mockingbird. And it was marketed as a sequel, but after people read it and kind of learned a little bit more about the history of how it was written, it's now looked at more as a first draft or an alternate version of To Kill a Mockingbird, because Harper Lee actually wrote the manuscript that was published as Go Set a Watchman first, and then on the advice of either her publisher or her agent, she went back and she did a very extensive rewrite of it to focus on the childhood of Scout as opposed to Scout as an adult, because in Go Set a Watchman, we see Scout as an adult and an older version of Atticus. And when the book was published, it was controversial for many different reasons. It was controversial because people thought that by publishing it, the publisher had taken advantage of Harper Lee, who was in extreme old age and had apparently been dealing with some cognitive decline. And people were like, aha, or, is she being taken advantage of? Did she even want to publish this? Like that sort of thing. And those are all completely legitimate concerns for people to have, totally apart from the content of the book. And as far as the content of the book, there were a lot of people who were really, really upset at the characterization of Atticus Finch. And I'm sure, at least here in the United States, I'm sure most, if not all of us, especially if you're my age, you have read To Kill a Mockingbird. You probably read it in school, and you have probably seen the film, the wonderful film starring Gregory Peck as Atticus. And it's a beloved story in its original form as a novel and as a film. I guess it's a great book and a great movie, and Atticus Finch is one of those almost universally beloved characters. He's like Superman without superpowers. He's this paragon of virtue, this guy that everybody can look up to. And if you were fortunate enough to have a real person in your life, a father or a grandfather or some role model, like you think of them in terms of Atticus Finch as the person who made you who you are, who taught you right from wrong, who taught you how to have the courage of your convictions. And if you didn't have a real person in your life like that, then Atticus was that person for you. He was that role model, that person that called you to be a better person. So very significant character, one of the most important and most influential and most beloved fictional characters, certainly from 20th century American literature, if not even well beyond those boundaries. And the reason why people had a lot of problems with how Atticus is portrayed in Go Set a Watchman is that Atticus in Go Set a Watchman, he is not nearly the idealistic character that he is in To Kill a Mockingbird. In To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch is the prototypical anti-racist white person. He is that white person who uses his privilege and his standing in the community to fight back against racism, to defend a black man who has been accused of a crime, and he strikes a blow against racism and he fights the good fight. And even though he loses the case, he still is a role model for everyone, especially every white person, to say racism is bad and we should stand up and stand against it and fight back, because that's what Atticus Finch would do. Like, he's a hero. He's a heroic figure, and he fights against racism and discrimination and bigotry and intolerance of all kinds, right? He's that guy. And his portrayal in Go Set a Watchman is not nearly as flattering. He has some pro-segregationist views. He is, he's not a dyed-in-the-wool, total, like, unrepentant bigot, but he is not the progressive, forward-thinking, open-minded idealist that he is presented as in To Kill a Mockingbird. And a lot of people were really upset by that and were really disillusioned by that. And it was often seen on the internet at the time and heard from people who expressed themselves, oh my God, this book ruins Atticus Finch for me. And it's that idea that I want to focus on in this video. In my previous video, the Relax It's Only a Movie one, I talked a lot about a guy who posted a Twitter thread where he claims that going to see The Last Jedi was one of the worst experiences of his life. And you will also hear people expressing similarly strong feelings in this way. They'll say such and such ruined such and such for me. They'll express really strong emotions in a way that you might assume is hyperbole. You might assume they're exaggerating on purpose to make a point. And indeed, a lot of you responded to my last video by assuming that. They said, well, Steve, you're making too big of a deal out of what this guy said. He's clearly just using hyperbole. Maybe, but if you go back and read that guy's entire thread, I don't think that's the case. I don't think he's using hyperbole to just express his opinion that he didn't like the movie. I think when he says going to see this movie was one of the worst experiences of my life, he is earnestly trying to express that literal thing. And there are a lot of people, the same thing, when they say Star Wars The Last Jedi or Ghostbusters 2016, or name your thing that has been unpopular with certain groups of fans over the years, ruined my childhood. And in some cases, I think they are just engaging in hyperbole to make the point very strongly that they really didn't like this thing. But in other cases, people seem to genuinely mean it. They seem to genuinely mean that the new Star Wars movie or show, or the new Star Trek movie or show, or the new whatever ruined their childhood. You saw that in response to the 2016 Ghostbusters movie, the all-woman Ghostbusters movie. Oh my God, that new Ghostbusters movie ruined my childhood. Oh my God, that Indiana Jones movie ruined my childhood. Oh, that new Star Wars movie ruined my childhood. Or ruined Star Wars for me, or ruined the Ghostbusters for me, or ruined whatever for me. And it's at this point that I am especially grateful that I don't look at things that same way. At least I don't anymore. And this is not me trying to tell you that the way I look at things, or the way I interact with the media I love, or the way I feel about the media I love is superior to anybody else's. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to make the argument that I'm better than anybody else, or that the way I think and feel about things is better than anybody else. It's all subjective. Nobody is objectively correct in their opinion about any piece of art, nor in their approach to any piece of art, or art in general. It's all just differences. It's all taste. It's all preference. And it's all the same in terms of its value and its validity, right? But seeing other people, especially people my age and even older than me, lose their minds over bad movies or bad TV shows or bad books or whatever, and not just lose their minds by going over the top and expressing how much they don't like it, but treating it as though something precious has been taken away from them forever because of this one bad thing. The existence of this one bad thing has tainted everything else related to it for them. I am very grateful that I do not view movies and TV shows and other various forms of storytelling in that way. I feel like I am very fortunate to be able to view them the way that I view them. Again, the way that I view them now, because let me tell you something. When I was younger, one of the first movies that I really not only loved just as a movie to watch and enjoy and think about and talk about, but that I really loved as like a piece of art that I thought, oh man, this is a great film. I'm so glad I discovered this movie. It's a great film and I can watch it over and over again and I can always find something new and I can think about it and talk about it in so many different ways and there's so many different ideas and themes and oh, I love it. That movie for me was 2001: A Space Odyssey. That was, if not the first, one of the first movies that I ever felt that way about, that I ever watched and thought, this is a great movie. And I can just really dig into this. And I can not just enjoy it as a movie, but admire it as a piece of art. I loved 2001: A Space Odyssey. I still love 2001: A Space Odyssey. It is still one of my favorite movies ever. For many, 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 many years, I refused to watch the movie 2010, which is the sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey. And the reason I refused to watch 2010 is because one of the things I really, really love about 2001 is the fact that it raises a lot of questions that it does not definitively answer. There's a lot of mystery in 2001. There's a lot of mysticism. It's remote. It's surreal in a certain way. It's enigmatic. It's unknowable. It shows you things that seem to demand explanation and then it does not explain. And a lot of people find that frustrating. A lot of people find that boring. A lot of people just don't like the movie for that reason and for lots of other reasons, but I love it. And I love that quality that it has, that mystery that it has. And I had always read that 2010 kind of comes at it from the opposite direction. 2001 poses all of these questions and then very deliberately does not answer them and leaves things ambiguous for the audience. And 2010 then sort of comes in afterwards and takes away all the ambiguity and says, okay, since you've been wondering about this, this, and this, let us explain exactly what all that was about. And let's tell you everything that happened and tell you and frame the story in much more literal, concrete terms. And not only was I not interested in that, but I positively avoided it because I was afraid that if I watched 2010 and got the answers to the unanswered questions from 2001, that it would ruin 2001 for me. And I held on to this idea like for well into my adulthood, well into my 30s, where I was like, I don't want to watch 2010. It'll ruin 2001 for me. Like to the point that I'm a little embarrassed that it took me long enough to get over it. Eventually, I watched 2010 just out of curiosity, and it's a perfectly fine movie. And nowhere near as good, and it's never going to be a favorite of mine like 2001, but it's a perfectly fine, intelligent, well-made science fiction movie. And sitting here today, I can tell you, it has in no way ruined 2001 for me. Why is that? Because I realized, finally, that 2001 is always going to be 2001. And nothing that anybody does or says or changes in another movie is going to have any effect on it. Because it is what it is. And when I watch it, I'm watching it. And I'm enjoying it for the reasons I've always enjoyed it. And what they say or do in 2010 doesn't matter, because it's not a part of 2001. And you can say the same thing, and I do say the same thing, about To Kill a Mockingbird. The people who said Atticus was ruined by Go Set a Watchman because this pure heroic figure from To Kill a Mockingbird has been dragged down to earth and has been sullied and has been dirtied and has been ruined by Go Set a Watchman. My response to those people? Go read To Kill a Mockingbird again. It's still there. Go watch the Gregory Peck film of To Kill a Mockingbird again. It's still there. It's still wonderful. It's always going to be there. Go Set a Watchman hasn't changed a single thing in it. And you might say, well, Steve, that's easy for you to say about something like 2001 and 2010, or Go Set a Watchman and To Kill a Mockingbird, but those are self-contained stories. Those are two stories apiece. What about something like Star Wars or Star Trek or superhero franchises that go on and on and on and have all these different things? What about those? It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. People who say, well, those new Star Wars movies, the Star Wars sequels, well, they ruined Star Wars. I can't go back and watch the original trilogy anymore and enjoy it knowing what happens in the sequels. I can't enjoy Star Wars anymore knowing what they do to Han Solo or knowing, oh, the terrible thing they do to Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. I can't enjoy Star Wars anymore. In a way, I feel sorry for you, because as much as you hate the Star Wars sequels, I can't say I hate them. I don't use the word hate, but I really dislike the Star Wars prequels. I don't like them. I think they're bad movies. Have they ruined the original 3 Star Wars movies for me? No, they haven't. Not even a little bit. Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. I love all 3 of those movies, especially the first 2, but I love all 3 of those movies. And when I'm watching one of them, I'm not thinking about what happened in Phantom Menace or Attack of the Clones or Revenge of the Sith, just like I'm not thinking about what happens in Rise of Skywalker or The Last Jedi or The Force Awakens. I'm watching the movie I'm watching, and I'm enjoying the characterization of the characters in that movie. And nothing from any other movie is ever going to change that. I'll give you another Star Wars related example. I really, really like The Last Jedi, as I said in my previous video. I think it's a great movie. And one of the things that I don't like about Rise of Skywalker is the way it seeks to undermine or undo some of the, to me, most interesting things in The Last Jedi. One of my favorite scenes in The Last Jedi is the scene after Rey and Kylo have teamed up and they've taken out the Emperor and his guards, and the Supreme Leader, not the Emperor, but the Supreme Leader. They've cleared out the throne room, and they're having their one-on-one sort of heart-to-heart where Rey has been trying to turn Kylo back to the light side and Kylo has been trying to turn Rey to the dark side. And Rey has been wanting to find out about her parents, right? Wanting to find out where she comes from, who she is, why she was left on this planet, all of that. And Kylo says, I've looked into the Force and I know the truth. I know who your parents are. Don't you want to know? And he tells her, and he says, your parents were nobody. You come from nothing. You have no place in this story. He literally tells her that. You have no place in this story. You are nobody important. And it's crushing to Rey to hear that. And it's such a great scene. And I love that idea. I love that revelation. Oh, wow. Rey isn't a Skywalker or a member of some great bloodline. Rey's just some person who technically doesn't have a place in this story because she's not related to any of the families that have been warring in this saga. But yet here she is. And she is playing a very important role in the story. She is, depending on how you look at it, the star, the central hero of this story. So I love that scene for itself, for its drama. I love it for its commentary on the overall Star Wars thing. I love it. It's one of my favorite parts of that movie, and it's so well acted, and everything about it is great. In The Rise of Skywalker, they basically say, never mind. She's Palpatine's granddaughter. Guess what? Her parents took her away from all of this, and she's somebody important because of her bloodline after her. Like, they undo my favorite part of The Last Jedi, right? Does it ruin The Last Jedi for me? Nope. Not even a little. Not even a little. When I watch The Last Jedi and we get to that scene, does the fact that I know in the next movie they completely undercut and rewrite this scene, does it ruin that scene for me when I'm watching it? Nope. You know why? Because I'm not watching Rise of Skywalker. I'm watching The Last Jedi. And I'm interested in The Last Jedi and what it is showing me and what it is telling me. And I'm taking it on its own terms, as a film, not as a collection of facts in a bunch of lore, as a story with characters and a plot and stakes and revelation and characterization on its own. And it works. And for me, it will always work. And there's nothing that any movie before or after is ever going to do to change it. Even if it's a movie that takes place in the larger sort of meta story of the franchise, it doesn't matter. I'm watching the movie I'm watching, and the movie I'm watching is great. And the movie I'm watching has scenes that mean something and that get me and that hit me and that mean something to me. And if some other movie comes after it and takes a shit on it, well, that's to the detriment of that movie, not this movie. And it seems like a lot of people just are either incapable of seeing it that way or just refuse to see it that way. And I can relate to it in a sense because, like I said, when I was younger, I used to think that way. And I am so glad, I am so grateful to whatever experience I had, to whatever insight I gained at some point along the line to get to where I am now, that I realized that it just makes so much more sense to me to take each individual work as an individual work. Even if it's part of a larger work, even if it's part of a series or a saga, take each thing as its own individual work and like it or don't like it based on that. It allows me to enjoy more things that I enjoy. It allows me to not enjoy things that I don't enjoy without letting that lack of enjoyment ruin the things I do enjoy. There is so much of this mentality in the Star Wars fandom, in the Star Trek fandom. When the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie came out in 2009, which I thought was terrific. I loved all of those Kelvin Timeline movies, but the reaction from some corners of the Star Trek fan base when they thought that the time travel plot of Star Trek 2009 had quote unquote erased the original series and TNG and Deep Space Nine and all the shows from the Prime timeline, you would have thought that real people had died. There were fans, Star Trek fans, that were like, I can't believe they ruined Star Trek. They erased Star Trek. Did they? So your DVDs they're blank now? When you are flipping through the TV channels and it says, coming up next, classic episode of Star Trek from 1967 or whatever, and you watch that show and it's just an hour of nothing, interrupted by commercials? The show doesn't exist anymore? Of course it does. Of course it does. All the Star Trek that you like, even if you hated the new movies, even if you thought they were complete garbage, the stuff you loved is still there. And you can watch it whenever you want. Same with Star Wars. Same with superheroes. Same with Ghostbusters. All the people who lost their fucking minds about that 2016 Ghostbusters movie. Oh, they ruined Ghostbusters. That was my childhood. They ruined my childhood. Do you not have a copy of Ghostbusters that you can watch whenever you want? Like, how has anything been ruined for you? The thing you love is still there, and it's exactly the same as it was the last time you saw it. So, like I said, I have outgrown that. And I'm very glad. I'm very glad that I can watch 2010 and enjoy it or not enjoy it for its own merits and not have to worry, like a child, that it will ruin the other thing that's related to it that I like. I'm very grateful that I can watch what is, to me, kind of a shitty Star Trek show like Lower Decks. Apologies, I know that it's still an open wound for you Lower Deckers who are upset that it was canceled after only 5 seasons. I really don't like Lower Decks, and I like it less now than I liked it when it started. Like, it has completely worn out its welcome with me, and I'm not going to miss it, and I do not like it. Has it ruined Star Trek for me? No. Do I think that, it's not canon? That's childish talk. I don't care if it's canon or not. Of course it's canon. It can all be canon. That fucking monstrosity where Kirk says goodbye to Spock on his deathbed that I did a video about a few weeks ago, that can be canon too. I don't care. I don't care what's canon. I care what's good and what's not, right? And the existence of some bad stuff in the series or the franchise that I like doesn't make any difference to me in relation to the good stuff that I like. And like I said, I'm not saying my way is better. I'm not saying I'm better than any of you who don't feel this way. I'm just saying I'm glad that I feel the way I feel about it. And I don't feel the way that the such and such ruined my childhood people feel about it. And if I could give one piece of advice to those people, unsolicited, grain of salt, take it or leave it, but all of you who have ever watched a bad movie or TV show in a franchise you love, whether it's Star Wars or Star Trek or Ghostbusters or apparently He-Man, because a lot of you said the same thing about the She-Ra animated series on Netflix, which was excellent, by the way, and I say that as someone who grew up on the original He-Man cartoon. That's my shit. And I'm saying that the She-Ra cartoon from Netflix from a few years ago was excellent. But anyway, whatever it is, whatever your thing is, if you have ever uttered those words, this new thing ruined the old thing for me, or this new thing ruined my childhood, the one piece of advice I have for you is the same advice that I would give my younger self and that eventually my younger self took. And I'm very glad that I did. And it's this: grow up.